The words coiled around my throat like a phantom's touch, a chilling whisper from the other room that found me in the dim hallway. Just put her in a goddamn home and be done with it, or better yet find a doctor who'll sign the papers to have her committed. I stood frozen, the dampness from a dish towel seeping into the thin skin of my fingers, my breath catching in my chest. They didn't know I was there, they never knew when it mattered. The polished mahogany floorboards beneath my slippers felt colder than a tombstone, and the insult rooted itself inside me, a seed of ice that began to spread through my veins. I should have turned, should have retreated to the guest room that felt more like a cell, letting their venom pass like all the other slights I had weathered in silence. But this time was different. This time the silence broke. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 81 years old, a widow, a mother, and once upon a time the wife of a man who believed jazz could solve most of the world's problems. I raised a son, Julian, who used to trace constellations on my palm with his small finger and bring me iridescent autumn leaves he'd found in the Boston public garden. Now he wouldn't fetch me a glass of water unless his wife permitted it. Her Serafina, my daughter-in-law, a creature of such dazzling and hollow beauty that it made your teeth ache. After my husband Arthur passed, the silence in our Beacon Hill brownstone became a physical weight. We had been married for 53 years. A sudden aneurysm had stolen him in the night, a silent thief, leaving behind a void that echoed with every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. For 7 months I haunted that house alone, polishing his reading glasses, brewing his favorite Earl Grey tea, pouring 2 cups every morning out of a habit my heart refused to break. Then Julian arrived, his face a mask of practiced concern. Mother, you can't be rattling around in this huge place by yourself. It's not safe. Why don't you come live with us for a while? At the time it sounded like salvation, like the warmth of a fire in the dead of a New England winter. Serafina had welcomed me with a hug that felt like a cage of perfume and bone. Of course, Eleanor, she'd purred, her manicured fingers clutching my hands as if I were a priceless, fragile artifact. We would be honored to have you. This is your home too, after all. She made me chamomile tea in a delicate porcelain cup and placed a photograph of Arthur on the mantelpiece, a gesture so thoughtful it brought tears to my eyes. That night I cried with gratitude, believing my son had married an angel. But I've learned that angels are often just demons with better marketing. Kindness, when it is a performance, has a short run. The cruelty began subtly, a series of minor erosions. My collection of antique teapots was moved from the glass front cabinet to a dusty box in the attic. We're decluttering, darling, Serafina explained with a smile that never reached her eyes, going for a more minimalist aesthetic. Then came the requests, phrased as suggestions. Could I manage the dusting while they were at work? Their cleaning service was becoming so unreliable. Of course I did. I polished their silver, ironed their linens, and scrubbed their marble countertops until my reflection stared back weary and diminished. I cooked their meals, recreating the complicated French recipes Serafina favored. Julian would sometimes offer a distracted thanks, Mom, his eyes glued to his phone. More often there was only the sound of cutlery on porcelain. One morning, the Sub-Zero refrigerator, a monstrous stainless steel beast they'd installed, refused to open. It chirped at me, demanding a code. Serafina, entering the kitchen, let out a tinkling laugh. Oh, silly me, I forgot to tell you we've put a lock on it. Part of our new smart home security and diet tracking system keeps everything perfectly fresh. She said it with such breezy nonchalance, but I saw the flicker of a glance she shot at Julian, who suddenly became intensely interested in a spot on the floor. I started hiding oatcakes and dried apricots in my sewing box. There were days the tea she prepared for me had a strange metallic aftertaste. Once I woke up slumped on the living room sofa, a thick fog in my head, and the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. I had no memory of getting there. My mouth was parched, my thoughts sluggish and disjointed. When I asked Serafina what had happened, she simply patted my hand. Oh, you must have just drifted off, sweetie. It's perfectly normal at your age. You need your rest. Her voice was a balm of synthetic pity, but her eyes for just a second were as sharp and cold as surgical steel. I began pouring my own water and making my own tea from then on. The house, my home, began to transform around me. My worn, comfortable reading chair, the one Arthur and I had bought on our honeymoon in Nantucket, vanished. We sold it on Facebook Marketplace. Serafina announced, not even feigning regret. It was clashing terribly with the new rug Arthur's photograph quietly disappeared from the mantel. My leather-bound collection of classic novels was lost during a particularly aggressive round of spring cleaning. My presence was being systematically erased. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, the low hum of an appliance an inconvenience to be managed. I told myself it was a period of adjustment, that grief had made me paranoid and overly sensitive. I clung to the fiction of their kindness because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. But hearing those words from the hallway, "Get her committed," snapped the last thread of my denial. I remember the tone she used, not angry but bored, annoyed, as if I were a stubborn wine stain she couldn't scrub out of the upholstery. I risked a peek around the doorframe, my movements slow and silent. Serafina was at the dining table, flipping through a copy of Architectural Digest, a blood-red nail tapping impatiently against her ceramic mug. Julian stood by the window, his shoulders hunched, a portrait of ineffectual misery. "I'm serious, Julian," she went on, her voice low and sharp. "Your mother contributes nothing. She eats our food, takes up space, and wanders around this house like a damn specter. I did not sign up to be a full-time caregiver. We want a life, we want to travel, to have children. We can't do that with a perpetually underfoot smelling of mothballs and regret." Julian sighed, a weak, defeated sound. "She'll never agree to a nursing home." "She won't have to," Serafina countered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She's too exhausted to put up a fight. We just need a doctor's report, something official. You've seen how confused she's been lately. Honestly, she's halfway gone already." I hadn't been confused. I'd been awake for nearly 2 days straight, fighting off the groggy, disorienting effects of the herbal supplement she'd slipped into my evening cocoa, a fact I was certain of, but could never prove. "We get her properly evaluated," Serafina continued, laying out her strategy like a general planning a siege. "Once we have a diagnosis of cognitive decline, we file for conservatorship at her age. With her symptoms, it'll sail through the courts. It's for her own good, really." Julian ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I don't know, Sarah, that's my mother." She closed the distance between them, her face inches from his, her voice a silken threat. "She's not your mother anymore, Julian. She's a liability, a drain. Look at her. She talks to herself, forgets where she puts things, barely leaves her room. She's a whisper away from the grave. And I will not let her drag us down into it with her." That was when I retreated, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I slipped back into my room and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling uncontrollably. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me erased. They wanted me declared legally incompetent, a non-person, so they could seize control of what did they imagine I possessed? They thought I was a poor widow living off a meager pension. Good, let them believe it. They had never asked about Arthur's portfolio. They never wondered why I lived so frugally. They never noticed the small locked firebox hidden in the back of my closet, the one containing Arthur's last will and testament, the one that named me the sole beneficiary of his life's work, a meticulously managed collection of stocks, bonds, and real estate valued at precisely $8.7 million, all of it liquidated and secured in a private trust the year before he died. They didn't know because their greed was a shallow, unimaginative thing. They saw a frail old woman, not the woman who had balanced the books for Arthur's architectural firm for 30 years. They saw a doddering widow, not a mind that could still calculate compound interest faster than they could. They had made a fatal error in judgment. They mistook my silence for surrender. But I remembered every word, every sneer, every calculated act of cruelty, and I would not forget the house they lived in, this grand Boston brownstone with its ornate plasterwork and gas-lit sconces belonged to me, Arthur. And I had purchased it as an investment. When Julian was accepted into Harvard, we never told him we believe some things in life should be earned, not simply given. So when he and Serafina announced their engagement, we allowed them to move in, letting them believe they were renting from an eccentric, unseen landlord who demanded only that the property be maintained. I paid the property taxes, the insurance, the utilities, all through the trust. They accepted this gift without question and certainly without thanks. Serafina treated the house as her personal kingdom. She had a penchant for what she called modern Parisian décor, which seemed to involve painting everything in 50 shades of greige and replacing solid oak doors with flimsy frosted glass panels. "You smell like old paper and sadness," she'd remarked one afternoon as I stood in the hallway clutching a stack of freshly laundered towels. It was one of her favorite lines, a casual cruelty designed to chip away at my sense of self. I said nothing. I simply turned and walked back to the laundry room. Her power was fueled by my humiliation at dinner parties. She would correct me loudly. "No, Eleanor, we use the Nespresso machine now. That old percolator is practically a biohazard." Her friends would titter, and Julian would study his wine glass, as if it held the secrets of the universe. He never defended me, not once. "You'd better hope you're gone by Thanksgiving," she'd said one day while directing workmen who were tearing out a perfectly good fireplace were putting in a media wall. She said it as if she were discussing the weather. That night I cried into the pillow Arthur had given me decades ago, the one embroidered with the outline of the Big Dipper. The next morning I began my war. It was a quiet campaign, fought not with raised voices, but with meticulous documentation. I bought a simple black journal and began to log every insult, every threat, every suspicious action. October 11th complained, "I use too much water, I should just shrivel up and die," she said. J said nothing. October 23rd found the back door unlocked again. After C claimed to have set the alarm, she said, "I must be getting forgetful." The words were my ammunition, but I needed more than words. I needed their own voices. I took an old ornate ship in a bottle that Arthur had treasured, a beautiful model of the USS Constitution, and carefully hollowed out a small cavity in its wooden base. Inside I fitted a tiny voice-activated recorder. I placed it back on the mantel, angled perfectly toward the living room sofa. Each night long after the house fell silent, I would retrieve the recorder, download the day's audio onto a thumb drive, and hide it inside an old tin of English breakfast tea. I labeled the drive Church Sermons 1992-1995. They would never look there. I captured everything: Serafina mocking my grief to Julian, her complaints about the cost of my medications, the chillingly casual way she discussed having me evaluated with a doctor she knew, someone sympathetic to their situation. I discovered she was not merely cruel, she was a predator building a case. I once glimpsed her laptop screen left unlocked. There was a folder on the desktop labeled EV Notes. It was a detailed log of every perceived slip-up, every moment of supposed confusion, every mistake I had made since moving in. It was a roadmap to my legal erasure. The fear it sparked in me was cold and sharp, but it was accompanied by something else, a fierce, cold resolve. I was not the woman they saw, and I was finished letting them write my story. The dinner where they made their move was an exercise in surreal tension. I had prepared a pot roast, slow cooked with carrots and pearl onions, just the way Julian had loved as a boy. The air was thick with unspoken things. Finally Serafina cleared her throat, her lips curving into that small predatory smile she wore when she was about to strike. She retrieved a thick manila folder from the sideboard and placed it next to my plate with a soft thud. "Let the relic sign the papers," she said, her gaze fixed on Julian, not me. "She doesn't even understand what she's reading." I looked down at the folder. Julian stared into his water glass, his knuckles white where he gripped the stem. The moment stretched thin and brittle. I reached for my reading glasses, a prop I no longer truly needed, and put them on. I wanted the delay I needed to calm the wild bird fluttering in my chest. I opened the folder. The dense, impenetrable wall of legalese stared back at me. Words like durable power of attorney, asset transfer, and irrevocable leaped out. This was not estate planning, it was a coup. "It's just some financial housekeeping," Serafina said lightly, pouring herself another glass of wine. "Standard procedure. We're just centralizing things to protect you in case anything happens." She draped the word "happens" in so much false sweetness, it was nauseating. I nodded slowly, making a show of squinting at the page. "I'm not sure I follow this part here," I said, my finger tracing a random Paragraph. What does this mean? Incapacitated Serafina let out a short condescending laugh. Oh, it's just legal jargon, Eleanor. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. It just makes things simpler for everyone down the line. I turned to my son Julian. Do you understand all of this? He finally looked at me, his eyes glassy and evasive. It's fine, Mom. It's just to let us help you so you don't have to worry about bills and things anymore. I feigned a weak smile, my hand trembling just enough to be convincing. Do I need a lawyer to see this? Serafina's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. That's not necessary at all. We had our attorney draft it. It's all perfectly above board. That lie slipped out smooth as butter. They bought it completely. They thought I was too tired, too old, and too stupid to see the cage they were building around me. I spent the next hour stalling, asking for explanations of clauses I understood perfectly, pretending to be confused, buying myself time while a cold, hard plan began to crystallize in my mind. That night I stayed awake in my room, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me. I documented the entire conversation in my journal, then backed up the audio file from the ship in a bottle, her voice clear as a bell. She doesn't even understand what she's reading. They wanted me to vanish, but I was about to become the most visible woman in Boston. The next morning I walked 5 blocks to a small cafe, and using a prepaid burner phone I'd bought for cash weeks ago, I dialed a number I knew by heart. Marcus Thorne had been Arthur's lawyer and, more importantly, his friend for 40 years. He had managed the trust, the quiet liquidation of our assets, and the drafting of the will that left everything to me. Arthur trusted Marcus with his legacy because he knew Julian, for all his good qualities, had a spine made of jelly. Eleanor, Marcus's gravely voice came over the line. I was wondering when you'd call. We met in his downtown office, a sanctuary of worn leather and the smell of old books. I laid it all out for him: the journal, the thumb drive, the copies of the documents Serafina had tried to make me sign. He listened for 2 hours without interruption, his expression growing colder with every recorded word, every documented slight. When I was finished, he let out a long, slow breath. This is premeditated elder abuse, Eleanor. What they're doing is a felony. She's trying to have me committed. Marcus, no, he corrected, his eyes hard as granite. She's trying to have you legally erased. Once she has power of attorney, she can liquidate everything you own, put you in the cheapest facility she can find, and no one could do a damn thing to stop her. I want to stop her, I said, my voice steady, quietly but permanently. He leaned back in his chair. Let's start with a background check on the lovely Serafina. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me on the burner phone. Her name isn't Serafina, he said without preamble. It's Isabel Monet, and this isn't her first rodeo. My blood ran cold. She's been married 4 times before Julian, all to wealthy men more than 30 years her senior. All 4 are deceased. How did they die? I whispered. Officially natural causes: a heart attack, a tragic fall, a boating accident. In every case, the grieving widow Isabel collected a life insurance policy well into the 6 figures and disappeared within a year. And Julian? Marcus paused. He's not a mastermind, Eleanor, but he's not a victim either. There are wire transfers from his accounts to hers before the wedding. He's a co-signer on credit cards with suspicious charges. He knows maybe not all of it, but he knows enough to be complicit. He's a willing fool. The ache in my chest was a familiar ghost, but the tears would not come. I had used them all up. I was awake now. They think I'm weak, I said into the phone. They're counting on it, Marcus replied. A plan colder and more precise than anything Serafina could conceive took shape. I began to fade, to perform the very decline she was so eager to see. I left the milk out on the counter. I forgot appointments. I asked the same questions repeatedly. Serafina bloomed under my supposed deterioration. She's getting so much worse, she'd whisper to Julian loud enough for me to hear. We're doing the right thing. It's a mercy. He would just nod, a puppet on her strings. Meanwhile, Marcus drafted his own set of documents. They looked identical to Serafina's, the same font, the same layout, the same crisp manila folder. But these papers were not a surrender, they were a confession. They were affidavits detailing financial fraud, Conspiracy to commit elder abuse and identity theft, all waiting for my signature. Marcus arranged for a certified notary, a young man named Leo, to play his part. My role was simple: act the frail, confused old woman and sign on the dotted line. The day came. Serafina dressed me as if for a special occasion, her touch sickeningly gentle. "Today's a good day, Eleanor," she cooed. "We're just going to finalize some paperwork, and then you won't have to worry about a single thing ever again." The irony was a bitter pill on my tongue. The notary Leo arrived promptly at 10. Serafina laid out the papers. I blinked, adjusted my glasses, and pointed a trembling finger. "What's this part again?" She leaned in, her perfume cloying. "It just gives us permission to manage things for you, sweetie. It's a blessing, really." Leo cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vance, are you signing these documents of your own free will?" I gave a faint wavering smile. Yes, I am. "And do you understand what these documents contain?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Oh yes, very clearly." Serafina beamed. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking with perfect control, and signed my name, Eleanor and Vance. Leo affixed his official stamp with a satisfying thud. "That's it," Serafina chirped, giddy with triumph. "We're done." I rose slowly. "I think I need to go rest now." I walked from the room, my back straight, my heart a block of ice. 3 hours later, Marcus Thorne filed everything, not with a local probate court but with the Massachusetts Attorney General's Elder Protection Unit and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He submitted every recording, every journal entry, the complete background check on Isabel Monet, and the notarized affidavit I had just signed. We had built a beautiful, inescapable trap. Exactly 1 week later, the storm broke. It was the evening of the Beacon Hill Philanthropic Society's annual awards dinner, a glittering affair where Boston's old money and new elite mingled. Serafina, or Isabel, was slated to receive the Community Compassion Award for her supposed charity work. She was wearing a gown of pale gold silk, a picture of grace and benevolence. Julian stood beside her in a tuxedo, looking like a man perpetually lost. I watched from across the street, sitting in the back of Marcus's town car, invisible in the darkness, just as the master of ceremonies began to introduce her. The grand ballroom doors swung open. 2 federal agents in sharp suits entered, followed by several uniformed Boston police officers. The room fell into a stunned silence. "Isabel Monet," the lead agent said, his voice carrying across the cavernous room, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." Her face, a moment before radiant, crumbled. The color drained away, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed mask. "I don't understand," she stammered. "There must be some mistake." The agents moved forward, the click of the handcuffs echoing in the silent room as they led her out, a pariah in silk. Our eyes met across the flashing lights of news cameras that had appeared as if by magic. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I simply held her gaze, my expression as empty and dismissive as the one she had given me for months. She was the first to look away. Julian saw me. Then he took a single faltering step toward the door before freezing, the chasm between us wider and more final than the street separating us. His mouth opened, but no words came. I turned my back on him and had the driver pull away. The next day I had a single envelope delivered to the house. Inside was a cashier's check for $1 and a single typed sentence: "For your silence." He came to the house 2 days later, disheveled and broken. He stood on the porch holding the envelope. "Mom," he whispered, "please." I just looked at him. I didn't know, he pleaded, the words tumbling out. I didn't know who she was. I thought we were helping you." She said, "You were sick." I finally spoke, my voice devoid of emotion. "You believed her because it was easier than believing me. You chose her comfort over my dignity." IW. As scared, he cried, his face contorting. "She said she would leave me. I thought I would lose everything." "You already did," I said softly. He sank to his knees on the porch, a quiet, pathetic collapse. I stepped back and gently closed the door, not slamming it, just letting it click shut. It was the sound of an ending. That evening I packed a single suitcase. I didn't look back. The flight landed in Bar Harbor, Maine, as the sun was setting, casting the rugged coastline in shades of rose and gold. I had bought a small weathered cottage overlooking the Atlantic, a place of stone and sea spray and solitude. I sat on the porch, a thick wool blanket over my legs, and watched the waves crash against the shore. No one asked me to sign anything, no one told me what to do. The only voice I heard was the wind, and it was singing a song of freedom. I thought of Arthur, and I whispered into the salt-laced air, "We made it, my love, I made it. This is not a story about revenge, it is a story about reclamation. It is about the profound difference between choosing silence as a strategy and being silenced by the will of another. Our worth is not a reflection in someone else's distorted mirror. It is an intrinsic truth we carry within us. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is not weak, she is simply gathering evidence. And sometimes the woman you mistake for a ghost is the one who owns the house, the past, the future, and most importantly herself.